I'm in awe today for two or three reasons. Because one, I know that I am in a room full of accomplished women. Women, you know, I did a lesson about 3 weeks ago in Texas, and it was called The Nameless Women in the New Testament. And it talked about the prominent women in the New Testament. You know, in Greece, women could have prominence. Women could hold office. Women could be elected. Women could do, but it said how many prominent women helped the Lord's church. But you know what it also said? How many nameless women. It would often say, and the women who were with Jesus, and the women who were. These were not the prominent women. These were women like Phoebe, who were nurturers, who helped the church. Throughout the New Testament, women strengthened the Lord's church. And just because you don't have prominence, or maybe there's no name attached, let me tell you something. Your name is in the book of life. And that's the only place that it matters. And so we have to understand that we want to be one place at the end of this life, our name's written in the book of life. And that's the thing that matters. And we need to live this life in view of that every single day. And the decisions we make are going to be in view of that. Now, I do want to say, Jamie, I'm delighted to meet you. And for your age, you are a wonderful, accomplished young lady. And I hope sometime you'll come and help me teach some of these young women, because they need people like you to be teaching them. They truly do. So I'm hoping we can work that out. And I have another hero in this group today. I didn't say idol, I said hero, right? There's a big difference. But Miss Betty Choate has been someone I have admired for a very long time. And you talk about somebody who's worked for the Lord, as far as I've ever known her, many, many years. And her name probably wasn't as well known as her husband. Do you know how that is? We were always somebody's wife. We're always somebody's mother. I'm Kyle Butt's mother now, which is interesting. But I've admired you for a long time and love and appreciate you very, very much. And one of these days, the only thing that matters is if we are all spending eternity together. That's what matters. You know, Betty, we were in India recently. Well, right before the pandemic hit, so it was 3 years ago, my son and his wife were there with us. And we were out working along, and I mentioned to my son that we weren't going to have a funeral, that my husband and I were not going to have a funeral. We aren't even going to have anything written in the paper when we die. We're just going to die and go to heaven. And so he heard me say that, and later that afternoon, he called me down to the little hotel, and he said, Mother, I need to talk to you. Now, a 4-star hotel in India is something to behold, isn't it? So he called me down. He said, Mother, let's have a cup of tea here and talk. And so I sat there with him. He said, now, Mom, you have to have a funeral. I'm telling you, you have to have a funeral. We're going to need closure. I said, what? He said, we're going to need closure. I said, oh, Stan. I said, when I get to heaven, if I'm there 30 years before you, when I see you there, I'm just going to say, oh, Stan, I missed you for a minute. Do you understand that we're living in these 24-hour day-type compartments? That's not what eternity is. And eternity is so close to us, and we are so close to eternity. We are one breath away from eternity. Every single one of us. And so it's not going to matter how long someone goes before you. You're just going to say, oh, I missed you for a minute. He said, well, Mom, I just don't know. But I said, well, this is how we feel, and this is how it's going to be. Because I believe that with every ounce of my being. I believe the spiritual world is right there. You're going to pass into the spiritual world. Your spirit's going to leave your body, and the Lord is going to say, that is a death that is precious in my sight. So I'll see you guys in a bit. No matter what happens, I'll just see you in a little bit. Okay, let me mention just a little bit about the books here before we totally get into our lesson. Seeking Spiritual Beauty, I wrote simply because Dolly Parton said, if I see anything sagging, bagging, or dragging, I get it sucked, plucked, or tucked. She said it takes a lot of money to look as cheap as I do. Boy, is that not the truth. And we need to teach our young ladies the truth about beauty. The society is bombarding them with a societal idea of beauty, that you have to be a beanpole and you have to have the whitest teeth in the world, and if your hair is not shiny. Listen, if a little girl comes in this building and she has on her shoes everything just right, and we say, "Oh, you are beautiful," and then she sits down and acts like a brat, is that beautiful? See, maybe when we see her help an elderly person with their plate at the luncheon, or goes and gets them a drink, we should be saying, "Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful." And even we as Christian women have bought into the wrong idea of beauty. And we need to start giving that back to our young girls, because they have it very tough in this society today. We need to give them back the truth about beauty. And that's what this book is about. And look, if you don't have it, you can't give it. You cannot teach what you do not know, and you cannot lead where you do not go. So if you don't truly believe that's what beauty is, then you're not going to be able to share that with somebody else. So we need to understand the true what beauty really is. Everyday Princesses for our young girls. I wrote this just because so many of them in the world get on that internet, have all kinds of problems. One little girl came to her dad. She said, "Oh, this boy just seems so good. Can I be friends with him?" And he said, "Sure, you can." And so they're friends. A few months later, after she's been led on by this young man, she runs to the kitchen crying, and her parents say, "What's the matter?" And the last thing her dad hears her say is MySpace. Her name is Megan Meyer. She's about 14 years old. And so her mother and father sit and talk for a few minutes, and the dad says, "You know, I sort of wish she'd never gotten that account, but she's been so happy lately." And so her mother says, "I think I better go up and check on Megan." She's in her bedroom, and she has hung herself. And they get her to the hospital. She dies the next day, and they're trying to figure what in the world happened to Megan, our daughter, who was happy. And well, come to find out, there was a young man, Josh Evans, who she had befriended on the internet. Nice looking picture, nice looking young man, and her father had even said it was okay about 3 months earlier. So she and Josh Evans had become friends, and when she was walking through, before she hung herself, her dad remembered that she said something about MySpace. So after the funeral, he goes to the computer and he looks on MySpace, and the last thing up there is the picture of Josh Evans, and he's saying to Megan Meyer, "You are an awful person. You are not good to your friends, and the world would be better off without you." Now, for 3 months, this person had led her on to think she was sweet and kind and even beautiful. And, one time she had asked for his address, and he said, "Oh, we're moving right now, so, I don't have an address right now." So she asked about that. So he told her the world would be better off without you. And Megan went and hung herself. About 3 months later, the neighbors called, the parents, and said, "We need to tell you something, but we're going to have to go to a counselor's office because you are not going to want to hear this." So they go to a counselor's office. Megan's parents are in there, the neighbors are there, and the counselor is there, and they said, "We have to tell you that there never was a young man named Josh Evans. That was a little girl's mother who was leading you on to think she was Josh Evans because your daughter was no longer friends with her daughter. And she was mad about it. And when she was not carrying on that conversation, the people at her work were doing it for her. This was a conspiracy to throw this little girl into trauma because she had not been friends with this lady's daughter. Now, our young people are taken in so easily, and we have to warn them. They have got to know what's out there. There can be a tagline that says, "Want to have some fun?" You think every kid says, "Yeah, I want to have some fun," and you go in there, nude pictures. It's just a terrible place, and we need to help them understand that. We're never going to be able to help them get rid of it. So we better help them be able to navigate. And that's what this book is a lot about. Everyday Princess, it's a lot about drinking. So much drinking going on today on our campuses, everywhere. That was one of the things in the State House. Everything you voted against was, are we going to put alcohol at the zoo in Nashville? Are we going to put alcohol on the college campuses? And of course, I'm always voting no, no, no. But I couldn't change it that way. It would be 78 to 8. You can only change people from the inside. and change your legislature from the bottom up. You never change people from the top down. And I began to realize that every vote didn't matter much because the people and the culture send what they want to the legislature. So you have to change the culture. That's the most important thing. So we need to be very careful that we're helping this drinking. It's such a society-approved thing. So many horrible things happen with alcohol. And of course, when you're in the legislature, they say, oh, we want it for the tax base. We want it for the tax. Oh, of course you do. Of course you do. But the fact of the matter is, the more alcohol causes is so much more. The tragedy of life that alcohol causes is so much more than any tax money you'll ever get. Broken families, broken homes, accidents, it's just unbelievable. But we always say, oh, we need the tax money. So alcohol is something that as Christians, we should certainly help our young people understand that if you never took the first drink, you would never become an alcoholic. You would never ruin a marriage and family because of alcohol. So we need to help our young people understand that. Used to be when I was in college, I could have walked around and carried a Coke around, and if I could have even set it down for a minute, I wouldn't have thought anything about that. Today, young ladies cannot do that. And if you have any opportunity to teach young ladies, you need to be doing it because they need to understand that even mean girls will try to bring down a nice girl. It's just the way that it is. And I hate that it's that way, but there are girls who want to see these little girls who are trying to do so good to bring them down. We had a SRO officer in Columbia, and his daughter went to a state college. He was telling this in a group, and she went to state college, and when she first got there, she had a roommate that the college had given her, and all through that semester, she said, the girl kept saying, oh, you're the only virgin on this floor. You need to come out and be like us. You need to just come out and be like the rest of us. Who do you think you are? You are the only virgin on this floor. So she came home after that first semester, and she told her dad what was going on. And she said, and if this keeps up, I'll probably change roommates next semester. So the next semester she comes home, and the dad said, well, what happened? Are you going to change roommates? She said, oh, no, we worked that out. And he said, you worked it out? How'd you work that out? She said, one night, my roommate just kept saying to me, oh, come on, you need to be like the rest of us. Who do you think you are? And I said to her, I can go out and be like you any night of my life. You can never go out and be like me again. And he said she never said another word about that, and that they were still roommates and friends. But we have to teach our young people to be bold, to stand up. Because our young people are the only ones in this world who really know, I'll say in our culture, in the world, there are young people that believe this, that they're made in the image of God. That they are not just some little goo that went through the zoo and now it's you. That's the theory of evolution in a nutshell. First you were just a little thing of goo, and then you were an animal and an ape, and now you're you. Now, if you really believe that as a young person, what difference does it make who you have sex with? What difference does it make how you speak? What difference does it make? You're just an animal. And our young people are being sold that bill of goods every single day in schools. And ladies, we're the only ones who are telling them, you are made in the image of God. You are special. You are the prize. And we need to help them to understand that, because our culture is certainly not going to do it. No Greater Joy is just written for young mothers, basically, and mothers and that are just trying to help their children learn the number one thing: love God first. That's all it is. Love God first. That's it. We're in a culture that almost worships our children. It's just unbelievable to me. Children are just an addition to your family. They're not your family. You and your husband are family. Then you might add a child or two, which I hope you do. But a family is a family, and the children are not the head of the family. And we have begun to make it that way. Every schedule we have is around their sports schedule and their school schedule and their every schedule. We have got to quit making them the little gods of our lives. We need to teach them that they're made in the image of God. And when your son comes home and he's made 28 points in a ball game, that's pretty great. It's fun, isn't it? But you better tell him that God gave him that talent. You better tell him that it's not you. You better thank the Lord that you have that talent. See, I didn't believe that high self-esteem was the greatest thing a child should have. I believe that high Christ esteem is the greatest esteem that a child should have. Knowing that God gave them every talent. God created them God created their physical bodies, everything. They need to give him the glory. So, if your son comes home, he's made 28 points in a ball game. You talk about that all week long to the friends, and everybody wants to talk about it. But on Wednesday night, he stood up here and read a scripture. And he stumbled a little bit. How many people did you tell that he read the scripture on Wednesday night? Because you see, whatever you're talking about the most is what he thinks you value the most. Your grandchildren too, grandparents, we are in a unique position to help our grandchildren understand Christ esteem. I never wanted to be the grandparent that gave the best bicycle for Christmas. No, never. I might give a Bible, or I might give a trip to Horizons, or I might give it. You see, it's never been about competition for who can give the best present. We have to get over that. When your grandchild looks at a Bible, I hope they think of you. That's what matters. Okay, Am I Ready to Be Baptized? Great book for any young people who are thinking about being baptized. After some read it, they wait a while, and after some read it, they call Stan and say, yes, I'm ready to be baptized. It's a great book for that decision, helping with that decision. We've got the dinosaur books back there. We've got lots of things back there just for you to look at, and if it can be. Listen, when my boys were growing up, I put good reading all over our house, and especially in the bathroom. I mean, that's just where I had everything I wanted them to read. And if we were going to talk about it at the table one night, I would put a little Post-it note that said required reading. And they'd say, oh, this is the required reading, going to have to read it. Well, the kids would come over from school, they'd look at it, they'd say, what's the required reading? Okay, we'll come Thursday night and eat with you and talk about it. So anyway, it was a great thing. When Kyle got married, he said, Mother, I want your dining room table. And it's just an old table. It was not even a good table. But what I knew what Kyle really wanted was what we had around the kitchen table. And we're missing that in our culture today. It doesn't always have to be the kitchen table. When my boys were playing football, there was a little tiny meat and three in Columbia, it's called Bucky's Restaurant. When they would get through with football practice, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, we'd go to Bucky's, and they would bring their friends to Bucky's, and we'd all be, they saved us the big round table at Bucky's. And we took anybody that would go, and we had the same thing we had at our home. Because the place was about to close, they would give the boys extra pork chops because they were closing up the place. And so probably at least one night a week, we took anybody from the tent and we went to Bucky's around the big round table. You need to be together as a family. And it's not the table that matters. You need to be able to take a pound of hamburger and make a fabulous relationship with other people out of a pound of hamburger. And we won't go into my cooking because it's renowned. It's renowned that I wasn't the greatest cook in the world because my boys are all preachers and they tell everything. But listen, I had to make things that could grow because they would invite people over. I mean, we live next door to the school. And so after every practice and I bet I made 5,000 grilled cheeses when my boys were in Columbia Academy. We lived next door. Everybody came over for a grilled cheese. So you just have to open your home. Don't ever worry about what people think about your house. Just care what they think about you. God doesn't care what kind of house you have. He cares what kind of woman lives in the house. He doesn't care what kind of car you drive. He cares what kind of woman drives the car. Now, we're going to talk about our decisions today because, you see, you might decide that you want to be a great writer. You might, but you never actually sit down and write. You have to make decisions to get where you want to be. There was a young man, he was 32 years old. His name was Kevin Carter, and Kevin was a photojournalist in Somalia. This was back in 1992. And he worked for the newspapers. He was a photojournalist trying to get pictures of the famine in Somalia. And so he was there taking pictures. He'd been there about 3 months. He had maybe even longer than that. He had pictures of children. Now, we don't know what famine is in this country. You might go 18 hours without eating, and you might think, oh, I'm starving to death. No, you don't have a clue what famine is. He has pictures of children following the camels around to get their feces to eat, following them around to get their urine to drink. These pictures can be found. This is a true story. Kevin went there. He was taking those pictures, and it was time for him to come back to the United States. And he was in a little village. There was a plane, some kind of little plane or helicopter coming to pick Kevin up in about 20 or 30 minutes. So he's in this little village. There is a feeding station 50, 70 yards away from where he is. But he's passing this little bush, and under the bush is a little child. And the child is curled up in the fetal position. And he said, I couldn't tell if it was a girl or a boy. They were just curled up, and it was just a little tiny, skinny thing. And he said, I don't know if it was a girl or a boy. But he said he noticed about 6 to 8 feet away, there was a vulture standing. The vulture was just standing there watching that child. And I don't know if you know anything about vultures, but the first thing they do is pluck your eyes out. The first thing they do is go for the eyes. So he says this vulture is watching this child. And he said, I'm thinking if I could get a picture of that vulture spreading its wings to pounce on that child, that I would win a Pulitzer Prize. So he said, I'm standing there with my camera ready. And I'm watching the child, and I'm watching the vulture. The vulture didn't spread his wings, but the plane came for Kevin Carter. So he thought, oh my, well, I guess I'm just going to have to take this picture. And he takes the picture of the vulture and the little girl. You can also find it on the internet. And he runs to the plane. And he gets back, and the picture is published. And people start calling his office. And you know what they're asking? What happened to the little girl? He didn't know what happened to the little girl. He often told people he didn't know what happened to the little girl. He won a Pulitzer Prize. And the next year, at 33 years old, he committed suicide. That decision must have haunted him. That decision may have made that his destiny. You see, the decisions we make are going to make us. Every decision you make is going to make you. Decisions that others make in our lives, where they are, and the decisions of others, sometimes they decide what our destiny is. A lot of times others make decisions that we can't control. Do you know what tomorrow looks like? I'll tell you. You're deciding today. Every decision you make is leading you in one direction or another. Every single decision. So you have to know, destiny is not fate. It is who you become by the decisions that you make. That's your destiny. And it's made by your own decisions. Now go with me to 1 Samuel 25, please. 1 Samuel 25. Someone who I admire greatly, love her, feel like she's one of my best friends, made a decision here that changed many, many lives. 1 Samuel chapter 25. Then Samuel died. And that's interesting because while Samuel was living, David had an ally. David had someone who knew that he was going to be king, and David had an ally. But when Samuel died, many people didn't know who David was. They didn't know he'd been anointed king. So 1 Samuel 25, verse 1, then Samuel died. And the Israelites gathered together and lamented for him and buried him at his home. And David rose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. So now David is just in the wilderness roaming. Many people don't know that he's the future king. So let's see what Abigail does. Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. And she was a woman of, look at this, good understanding and beautiful appearance. These are two characteristics of Abigail. Look at this. But the man was harsh and evil in his doings. Have you known good women who were married to harsh and evil men? I've known some. I have a dear friend who is dead because she married a harsh and evil person, and he killed her and her daughter. While I actually was in Jamaica and heard it on the news when I was in Jamaica. He was drunk. She had an order of protection against him. He went and banged down that door and killed her, killed the daughter, and the son still has 3 slugs inside of him. Some women are in very hard positions. And that was Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding and beautiful appearance. But the man was harsh and evil in his doings. He was of the house of Caleb. When David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep, David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, "Go to Carmel, to Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus you shall say to him who lives in prosperity, peace be to you, peace to your house, and peace to all that you have. Now I have heard that you have shearers. Your shepherds were with us, and we did not hurt them, nor was there anything missing from them all the while they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, therefore they will tell you. Therefore let me find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day." Now back then, when there was a feast day, it's kind of like Thanksgiving at our house. At Thanksgiving at our house, which is my big event of the year, not Christmas, but Thanksgiving. And my family comes, and they can bring anybody they want. It is just an open feast time, and nobody would say anything about anybody being there. And it's the same way here. When you are having your feast time, anyone can come, and you're supposed to give what you have and help others and help the poor. So David wouldn't have thought anything about coming on a feast day. Verse 8, "Please give whatever comes to your hand to your servants and to your son David." Now this is a king saying, "and to your son David." So when David's young men came, they spoke to Nabal according to all these words in the name of David, and waited. Then Nabal answered David's servants and said, "Who is David, and who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants nowadays who break away, each one from his master." Look at verse 11. "Shall I then take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men when I do not know where they are from?" Wow. Talk about selfish and ungrateful. Unbelievable. He didn't even bother to ask who David was. He said, "For all I know, he's just some wandering slave that's gotten away from his master." Look at verse 12. "So David's young men," and I have this underlined, "turned on their heels and went back, and they came and told him all these words." Wonder why those young men turned on their heels? I think I know why. I think they knew what David was going to say. After they had protected them in the wilderness, they hadn't taken one thing from. At any time, they could have killed the shearers and taken every one of the sheep or goats, whatever he had in the field. But he didn't. And then Nabal had no respect for him. So David's young men turned on their heels and went back, and they came and told him all these words. Then David said to his men, "Every man gird on his sword." So every man girded on his sword, and David also girded on his sword. And about 400 men went with David, and 200 stayed with the supplies. Now one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, "Look, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he reviled them. But the men were very good to us, and we were not hurt, nor did we miss anything as long as we accompanied them and stayed by them when we were in the fields. They were a wall to us both by night and day, all the time we were there with them, keeping the sheep." David's men had protected them. Now, I do love verse 17. It says, "Now, therefore, know and consider what you will do. For harm is determined against our master and against all his household. For he is such a scoundrel that no one can speak to him." Whoa. These young men knew they had one shot, and they were going to turn to Abigail. "Abigail, what are you going to do? You're wise and you're understanding. What are you going to do? Because we may all be dead by tomorrow." Look at verse 18. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already dressed, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, 200 cakes of figs, and loaded them with the donkeys. How many of you got that in your freezer? You know, every time I think about this, I think about when I used to call and somebody needed a meal and somebody would say, well, I don't have anything to prepare right now. I don't have anything. And I think, wow, she was prepared for whatever was coming. And she said to her servants, go on before me. See, I am coming after you. But she did not tell her husband. Now, somebody might fault her for this. Somebody might say, oh, she should have told her husband. She's going to tell her husband. And any of us that have been married more than 10 years know something about timing, right? When my husband used to come home from work, if my 3 boys would run up and ask him a question before we ate supper, it was no. We're not doing it. You can't do it. I'm not doing it. But if we would let him sit down and have a nice meal and eat, I would say, boys, wait till after supper to ask your dad. And so timing is hugely important here. So she did not tell her husband at that moment. So as it was, as she rode on the donkey, she went down under cover of the hill, and there were David and his men coming down toward her, and she met them. Now David had said, surely in vain I have protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belongs to him, and he has repaid me evil for good. May God do so, and more also, to the enemies of David, if I leave one male of all who belong to him by morning light. He was determined to kill every single male in that family. Now, when Abigail saw David, she dismounted quickly from the donkey, fell on her face before David, and bowed down to the ground. What a contrast between her husband, how he took the name of David, and how Abigail took the name of David. Now, let's see why Abigail does that. Because she's a woman of understanding. So she fell at his feet and said, on me, my Lord, on me let this iniquity be. And please let your maidservant speak in your ears and hear the words of your maidservant. Please let not my Lord regard this scoundrel Nabal. For as his name is, so is he, Nabal. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. Verse 26, now therefore, my Lord, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, since the Lord has held you back from coming to bloodshed. Oh, she's even saying, I'm coming here because the Lord wants you to refrain from bloodshed. Do you think Abigail knew who David was? She absolutely did. And by dismounting from that donkey and calling him Lord and showing him her humble heart. Now, I'm thinking David's heart is just melting about now. When this beautiful woman dismounts, puts her face to the ground, and says, let the iniquity be on me, a sinless servant. It sort of reminds me of Jesus at the cross. Because Abigail is saying, I didn't do this, but let it be on me. And I think David's manly heart is just melting when he sees this. And all throughout this passage, she calls him Lord. 26, since the Lord has held you back. And now this present, 27, and now this present which your maidservant has brought to my Lord, let it be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant. Oh, please forgive my trespass when she hadn't done anything. For the Lord will certainly make for my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord, and evil is not found in you throughout your days. Did Abigail know who David was? Yes, she absolutely did. She knew who David was. So apparently she'd been paying attention to what was going on in the land. Look at verse 29. Yet a man has risen to pursue you and seek your life, but the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living with the Lord your God, and the lives of your enemies he will sling out as from the pocket of a sling. He will destroy your enemies, and I know it. Verse 30. And it came to pass when the Lord has done for my Lord according to all the good he has spoken, and has appointed you ruler over Israel, that this will be no grief to you, no offense of heart to my Lord, either that you have shed blood without cause, or that my Lord has avenged himself. She's telling him revenge is not the answer, and when you're king, you don't want to look back and say you did this for revenge. But when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, I think Abigail's planting a little seed right here. she says, but when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your maidservant. Then David said to Abigail, blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me, to keep him from shedding blood. He said, thank you. And if you know the rest of the story, let's go to verse 37. So it was in the morning when the wine had gone from Nabal. He was drunk, totally drunk, which we've talked about that. When the wine had gone from Nabal and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him and he became like a stone. Then it happened after about 10 days that the Lord struck Nabal and he died. So when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, blessed be the Lord who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal. David didn't have to kill him, did he? And ladies, we don't ever, ever, ever have to take revenge either. Ever. The Lord will judge. And the Lord will be just to every single one of us. Now look at verse 40. Bless the Lord, go back to 39. Kept his servant, for the Lord has returned the wickedness of Nabal on his own head. And David sent and proposed to Abigail to take her as his wife. And she said, yes. She rose and went to him and she said, yes, I will marry you. And now she has gone from a very cruel, loveless, childless marriage to becoming the wife of a future king and becoming the wife of a king because of a decision that she made. Do you know why she made that decision? Because she knew who David was. She knew who God was. She says, I know that the Lord will keep my Lord, you, from doing evil. She knew who God was, and she cared. And ladies, that's the way every single one of us has to live. Now, I'm going to tell you 3 things about decisions, and then we'll take a break here. You might want to write this down if you're taking note. Here is how important it is. Your decisions are. You are free to choose. You do not have to go to your horoscope every day and see what's going to happen to you today. You are free, number 1, to choose. You're free not to choose, number 2. You are free not to choose. Most of the time, by not choosing, you're choosing, but you're free not to make a choice. But you are not free from the consequences of your choices. You are not free from those consequences. You know, they may talk about free love. It's not free. Many, many consequences. Babies without fathers, abortions by the millions. We're not free of the consequences. We're free to choose, free not to choose. But we are not free from the consequences of our choices. Let's pray. Father, I pray that every woman in this room is here today because she wants to grow closer to you, grow closer to your word, and every single one of us learn how to make our choices in view of eternity. Father, be with us here as a group of women who care, love each other, Father, and want to know more about you. Please use every one of us to your glory. In Jesus' name we pray these things. Amen.